Hello, trainers. Welcome back to the World Cup of Pokemon, hosted by Victory Road, sponsored by Elgato, GG Tour, and Metafi, and cast for this match by myself, Hayden McTavish, and Maeve O'Rourke. How are you feeling, Maeve?
I am good. I'm psyched to just get that first match underway, kind of get us all kind of into the mood, up to speed with the vibe of that Series 12 top 8 matchups. You saw, especially in that last round, right? How crazy the competition gets when you get up to a point that's really this far advanced. We're 8 weeks into this competition right now. There's only really 2 weeks left as well. So we're at the tail end. So this is when the matches, I think, to me, get very exciting.
Yeah, I think there's so many times in these last few weeks of matches where it seemed like I've been sure. This one side is for sure going to win. There's no way the other side can come back, and then they do. Or just like the players are so robust to a specific mistake, and then they come back and are able to handle things just so well. And I'm really excited to keep casting all of these higher stakes matches with these really veteran teams that are really accomplished in the format. Just wonderful to see.
Yeah, and I mean these teams, right? The teams that will be featuring this for this match, it's Canada and India, and both of these teams in their last rounds, right? This is, I believe, both their first time in top 16. They both, I don't believe, made it out of group stages in the last year. I know India suffered from 3 ties in their group last year, so they didn't even get to make it this far. India is a team that I think is incredibly strong. They have a great contingency of players, both that live in India full time, and also a couple of players from the United States who have that dual citizenship or different qualifications to allow them to play on the Indian team. And so there is a lot of strong team building there. However, they're going up against Canada, which is a team that you and I spoke about a little bit in between break with our friend Evan as well. It's a very young team, and they have a lot of vitality to them, a lot of really great insight, and it's a really interesting community, right? Because Canada, it always kind of gets lumped in with the United States a little bit when you think about them internationally, but they truly are their own team with their own insights, and they've done incredibly well just to get this far, and they definitely, I think, have way more Pokemon that they want to be playing.
Yeah, I think both of these teams I was so excited to watch getting into these top finishes. I think they're teams that in previous iterations of World Cups, back when I was a player many years ago, both of the teams kind of struggled to play and make it to those finals. I was on Team Canada myself, and we never quite made it. And it's really cool to see. I've loved watching the incredible performances from both sides. India had some spectacular runs at the beginning of the tournament, and both of these teams just have so many amazing players that I'm really excited to get to cast. Two of which are Neil and Devon. I'm really excited to jump into that shortly.
Yeah, and I believe yesterday during your casting, you had a double header between India and Canada. Both matches ended up going 1-1. Currently, now with that updated result, Canada is up 2-1 over India. So this match won't determine anything as of yet. But if Canada wins, that puts them at match point. India desperately trying to tie right now because a tie means that there is still an equal chance either way, and you're not letting Canada get too comfortable with that match point. But lots of really, a lot of names here that you still know. I know Raghav ended up playing Navjeet yesterday, and both of those players, I believe, were undefeated, if I'm not mistaken, Hayden?
Yeah, so the two that we cast yesterday were the other two on the board, actually. There was a sort of a seesaw battle back and forth between Canada and India, 1-1. But this huge match that happened that we didn't have the opportunity to cast between the two undefeated players on each side, Navjeet and Raghav, that one being decided for Canada is just such a huge jump in momentum, and being able to sort of take down a player as brilliant as Raghav in this matchup is a lot of momentum going for Canada. And if they're able to win this set too, that's a ton of momentum. But if India is able to claw right back up, that's really sending a message to Canada that no, you're really going to have to work for this win, and we're going to be able to come back. You can maybe beat one of our amazing players, but you can't beat all of them.
Yeah, and I mean, at that point, too, we've seen how well Raghav has done, right? Just to kind of spout some more accomplishments, how well he had played during the World Championships. They had an incredible run. So it's always great to see these players do so well in a format, kind of, just do so well consistently even. But if we want to take a look at our two players that we're going to be currently featuring between Neil and Devon, then we can kind of get a better idea as well into the insights of those two players, because both of them as well are very interesting, I think, kind of moving forward. VR Road to Frankfurt top 16 for Neil, along with a World Cup competitor and a World Cup Open top 32 for Neil. Devon, World Cup competitor last year, Players Cup 1 North American qualifier top top 12, Dallas Regionals top 16, International Challenge May, 5th place in 2019. So a lot of online success for Devon as well, which I think is or for both of these trainers really, which I think is really helpful when you're playing in a format like the World Cup.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many small differences that really matter when you're doing an online tournament versus an in-person one. The skills that you're leveraging are very different. Like, how do you make sure that you get yourself in a position to focus under really good circumstances for an hour and just play a brilliant game versus when you're trying to slog through a really big tournament? And then just being able to set all of those things up is really impressive. I'm sure both of these players are looking forward to getting some stronger live tournament finishes. They have some already, and it's exciting to see them just honing these skills in the online environment.
Yeah, and speaking of online, we will be dealing with 2 dueling pairs of restricteds, both in that Kyogre and Zacian. However, Devon bringing that dual weather team, bringing Torkoal along as well, and also bringing the Landorus and the Tornadus and Venusaur. So Tornogre, a really common thing here. However, we are seeing a little bit on the opposite side for Neil, so bringing the Incineroar, Rillaboom, Whimsicott, and that Thundurus. So a really interesting Firewater Grass core on Neil's side, and the Firewater Grass core on Devon's is, I think, equally as interesting, but does completely different things.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see that Kyogre paired with Sun. It gives you this option to sort of leverage your own Kyogre at certain times, but also try to slow down an opposing Kyogre, maybe play to that Venusaur route, and I think that's going to be really interesting for the match to come. One thing we talked about with Evan before jumping onto the stream is the team that Devon's using is actually one that Navjeet Joshi on Canada's team has been using very regularly for some really impressive finishes. And so it's possible that Neil has some practice with this particular team if he's played a lot with Navjeet, and that might really play into this match. We might see some really interesting plays from Neil trying to sort of read into the experience with that team.
Yeah, however, I'm sure both players are happy to not see a Gastrodon on the other side of the field. Whimsicott and Zacian will be coming out, and Zacian at Tornadus. So you and I last week, we had a little bit of a Whimsicott symposium. However, 2 different Prankster Pokemon with the opportunity for Tailwind does lead both of these Zacians, I think, into a very fun position of seeing who is going to be moving first. The Zacian on Devon's side did get his Intrepid Sword up first before Neil's did.
Yeah, always that really tough trade-off between the 2 Tailwind setters, which one's going to be able to position its Zacian better. I think on paper Whimsicott has the advantage because it has Taunt, possibly, and the ability to just give that faster Tailwind some faster Prankster moves. But Tornadus with that Icy Wind really means that this is a tough trade-off that there can often be a lot of high-pressure reads under, and then yes, on paper, if you know the Tailwind going up on both sides, which Zacian's faster, makes such a big difference.
Whimsicott going for Protect here, so that is the first move that it's going to reveal. Tornadus getting the Tailwind up first, though, so maybe that Whimsicott trying to stop something like an Icy Wind from breaking its Focus Sash. Behemoth Blade from the Zacian, though, into the Whimsicott, not going to hit through to Protect. The Behemoth Blade from the Zacian on Neil's side, though, will still be able to make a connection onto the Zacian on Devon's side. No Intimidate, so this does a ton of damage, usually about 3/4 of the damage when they're still at that +1.
Yeah, getting that damage off is huge, and on the board, Neil is just up by a lot in terms of like the concrete position. But being able to have Tailwind up for Devon, depending on what moves that Tornadus has, that's just such a huge advantage if you could potentially taunt that Whimsicott, or if you're stuck just trying to Icy Wind in position. Really impressive call to protect that Whimsicott, though. That's a move that Whimsicott don't always carry, so it's hard for Devon to read into. And then also, it's really difficult to make sure that you're playing defensively with your Whimsicott when really that Zacian could have attacked the other Zacian. And so some impressive reads from Neil, really putting him ahead in this start.
Tornadus protecting this turn and matching the Whimsicott from the turn prior. Whimsicott going for Tailwind, so really these two kind of just traded moves a little bit here, but Tailwind will be helping Neil, and that still means, though, that the Zacian on Neil's side still is going second, so that may just give us a bit of a clue that Devon Zacian is the faster one, kind of within any condition. Does do less damage there as well than the Zacian on Neil's side did to Devon. However, the Zacian from Neil going into the Zacian on Devon's side with this Behemoth Blade will be enough to take it out of the field and out of competition, which puts Neil, I think, at a great start ahead with whatever Pokemon he may want to Dynamax later on in the game.
Those Tailwind plus Zacian lead mirrors are so treacherous, and it's really interesting to see Neil finding a way to navigate out of that. That Zacian was under so much risk being the slower Zacian, but it's managed to take out the other Zacian, only taking one Behemoth Blade for its troubles. And importantly, Neil's been able to stagger the Tailwind, so there's going to be one turn in about 3 turns from now where there's Tailwind on Neil's side and not on Devon's side, unless Tornadus is still around to reset that. A lot of interesting momentum later down the road, and then also being able to get rid of that Zacian. But in the meantime, you have this Kyogre you have to deal with, which is definitely not something you necessarily love to face down.
Ooh, a screens Whimsicott here, running Light Screen to help protect it and its partner from some of those strong moves from the Kyogre on the opposite side. No move coming out from that Tornadus this turn through Prankster, which means that this Kyogre will be taking over 50 or just about 50% of its damage there, thanks to a Behemoth Blade. Icy Wind connecting from Tornadus onto both of these Pokemon, so will help to slow them down. Does break if there is a Focus Sash on Whimsicott, which there most likely is. Does break that this turn and drop the speeds of both of them, which I think is probably what Neil did not want to see. Origin Pulse connecting as well onto both of these Pokemon should be enough, I believe, to get the knockout on the Zacian. It is. Whimsicott still able to hang on there, and that Light Screen, I think, kind of being a big help to do so.
We've been talking a lot about, in a format like the World Cup, Pokemon like Whimsicott being incredibly valuable because they can have so many different sets, and it's really hard to know ahead of time. Even if you've seen someone use a similar composition before, their Whimsicott could be completely different. And it's really interesting to see this variant. I've never seen a Whimsicott that's really, or I haven't for a very long time seen a Whimsicott that's built for bulk, and being able to set up that Light Screen and survive a really powerful Kyogre move is a really interesting take that I think changes this matchup in many, many ways, and it's going to be up to Devon to sort of adjust and try to figure out, oh, okay, if I can't rely on my Kyogre for damage against that Light Screen, how am I going to handle that?
Yeah, it almost makes me wonder, right, if this is one of those Focus Sash Incineroars on Neil's side, and maybe this Whimsicott is running something a little bit different to kind of help, like you said, boost its bulk. Thundurus is a really great option to maybe have come in here. You probably weren't too upset to lose your Zacian to get your Thundurus in for basically free and get up a Dynamax. You can go for something like a Max Airstream, get your speed back up as well, but you're currently not afflicted by that Icy Wind, which is why Icy Wind, it can be great because you don't feel like you're wasting any turns once you get it up. It's not put you on a timer of any sort. But it does at least mean, too, that once that Pokemon gets knocked out and a new Pokemon comes in or you switch around, that Pokemon's speed is still, thanks to that Tailwind, still boosted up. So this Icy Wind right now from the Tornadus on the opposite side will knock out this Whimsicott and will bring the Thundurus down to -1, but you don't want to do that when it's got Defiant, because Defiant boosting that attack stat as well, gonna make whatever move it goes for super powerful here. Origin Pulse from the Kyogre into the Thundurus, not able to get that knockout that I think it so desperately wanted, and Kyogre also showing that I did not mention this, it's carrying that Life Orb as the item. Max Airstream into this Kyogre, able to get that knockout, able to boost that speed thanks to that Icy Wind that was lost a little bit earlier, and now I think the Thundurus is looking very dangerous.
Yeah, an interesting gamble from Devon's side, saying, I know I'm making this Thundurus incredibly strong, but I think it can KO most of my team anyways. Looking at the team that Devon brought, none of the Pokemon that he has are really able to take a Thundurus at +0, and so making the gamble of, you know what, at least I can make it slower with Tornadus staying around to be able to Tailwind now and reset the Tailwind. This Thundurus is actually going to stay consistently slower than that Venusaur, and that's a really interesting gamble to say, I've got the Focus Sash so I can still take a hit at +2. And in this particular situation, even though it's sort of textbook, you don't want to lower Thundurus' stats, I really do need to now. It gives me the threat of this Sleep Powder, it gives me the ability to adjust in other ways, and I really like that play, sort of recognizing that if Light Screen weren't up, that would have just won the game because Origin Pulse would have KO'd, and even with that, it gets so much damage on the board on this Pokemon that is really threatening otherwise. Although I suppose the Airstream makes that a lot more difficult. You'd have to somehow land an Icy Wind with a Speed tie, and that is pretty difficult for Devon to handle.
Devon going to be going for a Dynamax this turn, though. Going to be that Gigantamax Venusaur, a great threat in front of something like a Kyogre on the opposite side of the field, especially when you know that you may be able to be faster. I think one thing for Neil to know as well, though, is that Devon didn't bring the Torkoal, he didn't bring the Landorus, so those might be a little bit of pieces of information to bring into that next game. However, Tornadus protecting from Devon's side, not going to be taking any damage this turn unless it is through a max move. Venusaur also doing the exact same defensive play here, maybe just trying to stall out something like this last turn of Tailwind, but Max Airstream, a great target into this Tornadus that does so much damage, even through Protect. Technically a quarter and still did over half to the Tornadus on the opposite side of the field, boosting the speeds of both of these Pokemon. Kyogre's Water Spout won't do anything to either one, but it did not take any damage this turn, which means that even with the rain still up, it's going to be doing a lot of damage in the next few turns.
Yeah, tough to take so much damage on that Tornadus after giving Thunderous the boost, but really Devon identifying a really strong way to play. I got a little bit tripped up on the speed tiers, so let me sort of correct. Thunderous now, even with the +1 speed, because of the Icy Wind, isn't at +2. And now that Tornadus can set up Tailwind, whereas Tailwind on Neil's side is gone, he has no way to reset it. And suddenly there's a way that maybe you can make this Venusaur be the fastest thing on the field, and maybe that's something that's worth it, even though this Thunderous is able to do so much more damage, and you get that Vine Lash off, which is so important for this match.
Yeah, Kyogre still able to hang on here pretty comfortably. It will be a 2-hit knockout, and it will take some extra damage to boot in between. Max Airstream, though, into the Venusaur will bring it down to its Focus Sash, which is not exactly something you see very often. A Focus Sash being procced on a Dynamax Pokemon because they can be so bulky. However, this Thunderous on Neil's side is really trying to battle with the damage here. Kyogre's Ice Beam single target into that Venusaur, just ensuring that you get that knockout, because this Thunderous on the opposite side of the field has only shown one offensive move, being that Icy Wind. However, you know, we kind of get that sneak peek. We can see the other move is Hurricane, but you've still gotten enough boost, I think, at this point, if you're Neil, to kind of wrap this up pretty comfortably.
Yeah, it's interesting. Neil is in such a good position in terms of the boost, and getting that KO is a really big deal. But I think the Thunderous's Dynamax is fading now, and the Tornadus does have Protect, and Vine Lash is up. So there's definitely a world where this Tornadus just keeps clicking Protect until Thunderous is gone. It would require, I think, a double with where Thunderous is at on hit points, and Tornadus wouldn't outspeed unless there's a speed tie, and I'm mixing things up. Maybe the Tornadus is fast enough.
No, I think you're right.
So definitely some interesting win conditions Devon's playing. Somehow pulling this out to a nearly even match, almost like a coin flip, even though it seemed to start in such a bad spot for Devon.
Yeah, that first Protect goes up without a problem. However, rain stopping as well, not really too big of a deal especially, but it does mean that the Hurricane, if that did go off, wouldn't be fully accurate. However, like you said, this is going to be a 2-hit knockout with this Vine Lash, and you did get that up kind of in the later half of that Venusaur's Dynamax. So at this point, right, light screen is over. This is kind of just like the weird ticking time bomb of us waiting for a move to be clicked. There's no way that this is going to time. We're looking at the amount of your time there is as well. This game went pretty quickly. So, I mean, at this point, right, you may... It becomes a little bit funkier, right? Thunderous's Wild Charge goes off first, so maybe you were hoping for a speed tie, but you do, you take the knockout on your Tornadus. This Thunderous will knock itself out thanks to that recoil damage, but that still should mean that Neil takes this game thanks to being knocked out second, even though there are no Pokemon left on the field.
This is definitely what we were hinting at before when we were talking about how close these matches are when we're at this high level of competition. There were no Pokemon left at the end of that game, and someone still won because the game's designed to say that, but that's how close it was. And that really did come down to presumably a speed tie at the end. Otherwise, you would have assumed that Devon would go for the double Protect if he knows that he's slower than the Thunderous. And so that was like 47.5% of the time that would have been Devon's win. And so that's so interesting to see that Thunderous is so strong on paper, but being able to time things, let its Dynamax run out, set up that Vine Lash. There's so many tools that Devon has shown that he has for handling it that it's going to be really tough for Neil to be able to handle this in a situation where maybe you don't get every read right at the very beginning. Maybe you lose that Whimsicott on the Behemoth Blade. Maybe your Zacian gets hit instead. And so it's going to be tough for Neil. It feels like Neil actually needs the one who really needs to adjust relative to Devon. Devon sort of can get a few more reads right, win a speed tie, and those are all valid options for bringing himself back into this game. Whereas Neil sort of has to keep getting reads right and keep winning speed ties. That's definitely a bit more tough.
Yeah, and I mean, at that point too, right, you're also then including, okay, well, also Devon hit, I think, all of his Origin Pulses, and then you still need to make sure you hit all of your Origin Pulses along with getting the reads, and that's, you know, that's the fun part about running something like Kyogre or Groudon, is that you kind of do put yourself at the mercy of RNG a little bit, just to make sure that even if you can make every read correctly, you can get the double protects, but if you can't get that knockout when you need it, then that can sometimes be the deciding factor. Didn't come up in this game, always a chance that it can come up in either game 2 or maybe a game 3 as well.
Something that's really interesting about exactly what you mentioned of using these inaccurate moves is that it's sometimes hard to navigate that optimally. I think at the end game there, Neil had an opportunity to go for Origin Pulse with Kyogre to finish off both slots, and that would have won the game, but it risked a miss. And sort of knowing when to go for that and when not is this other challenge that these players have. If you can't get a guaranteed win, what gives you the highest odds? Is it like playing to something that winds up being a speed tie? Is it trying to hit a bunch of Origin Pulses? And that's one of the many challenges these players have to juggle.
We have the exact same leads that we had in game 1. Both of those Tailwind users in Whimsicott and Tornadus paired alongside their opposing Zacians for both of these trainers. Once again, we're in that very strange 50-50 of, do you go for something like that Tailwind, or do you protect, or do you try and target and get damage onto the opposing Zacian if you're Devon, knowing that you're faster? However, Tornadus is going to switch out here, and it's going to bring in that Torkoal, who did not come in that last game, going to change the weather. And if this is something like that Solar Blade Zacian, that could be pretty fun to deal with something like the Kyogre later. I don't believe that it is, though. Whimsicott's Tailwind will be speeding up the Pokemon on Neil's side first, which means that Neil's Zacian can go for this Behemoth Blade first, instead of maybe taking one on Devon's side from the Tornadus. Targets into that Torkoal, though. Torkoal takes this way better than something like that Tornadus would have. Does mean that's probably going to be something between a 3 and a 4 hit knockout. The Behemoth Blade from Devon's side, though, targeting into the Zacian on Neil's, will do pretty close to 75% of that HP, probably closer to 70. And still, at this point, you have that Zacian now on Neil's looking a little bit less comfortable than it did in game 1.
Yeah, a really interesting adjustment to bring Torkoal in. Something I had wanted to say about the lead matchup is just that there's so many different variations of this, and it's so interesting to see players really exploring, okay, Tailwind plus Zacian, what are the 70 different things I can do? And it's interesting to see one of them being bringing that Torkoal in. I think it's so strong against specifically this lead matchup of, okay, well, you're going to bring 2 Fire Weak Pokemon. I do have a Torkoal. It doesn't take anything from Behemoth Blade, really, but it is also tough to put yourself in this position where Kyogre can quite comfortably come in later in this game. Whimsicott can set a light screen to reduce the damage, and so there's a lot of tools Neil has now that this Torkoal has come in.
Yeah, Behemoth Blade once again going off at this point. Still going to target down into the Zacian on the opposite side. Does a ton of damage, actually. That might have just been a higher roll there, kind of showing even though your Zacian is slower, it is stronger. Devon's, though, will be firing right back off into the Zacian on Neil's side. Does get that knockout, so now Neil is the one to lose his Zacian first, but has the opportunity to bring in something maybe to take advantage of this. Yawn from the Torkoal, though, into the Whimsicott is going to mean that this Whimsicott is either forced to switch out on those next turns, or is going to have to start going to sleep. So, I think at this point, right, Torkoal's big legendary father in Groudon does a lot in terms of setting the sun and kind of keeping your Pokemon safe, but Kyogre can come in here and change up that weather, make this Torkoal not too happy.
Yeah, this is the turn I was talking about. If this Kyogre coming in can make things so difficult for Devon, you have to then just basically take a free Water Spout. It's for sure going to KO the Torkoal. It's for sure going to KO the Zacian. Tailwind's up. The Yawn coming in from last turn would have been amazing if it had caught that Kyogre on a switch, but Whimsicott staying in with that light screen option really makes things more difficult. This Kyogre's here, and it's safe to shoot out its water attacks, whereas Whimsicott is the thing that needs to switch out, and you don't really mind switching Whimsicott out necessarily. It's nice to have that Tailwind later in the game. So I'm curious, Devon must have been thinking about this situation when pivoting the Torkoal in, and I'm curious what adjustments there are for how to handle this. Maybe you just protect the Torkoal, maybe you just let it faint and you bring something else in at the right time, because you get those KOs earlier on, but definitely a tough spot, and I'm curious how Devon's going to get himself out of this.
Whimsicott switches in for the Thunderous. Torkoal going for Protect this turn, trying to not take something like a Water Spout or an Origin Pulse. Water Spout, the move of choice from Kyogre, not going to target into this Torkoal, but should be plenty enough damage here to get that last bit of HP off of the Zacian and get that knockout. Currently, no more Zacians in play for either trainer. However, I think at this point, right, Devon is going to need to bring something in or move something around that may pair better with this Torkoal. If he brought his own Venusaur and wants to get that speed boost, something here is going to need to switch out, and something's going to need to get a move around. So I think at that point, right, Neil also having that great positioning by being able to move his own Whimsicott in and out maybe and just keep the weather in his favor.
Yeah, definitely a tough spot with that Whimsicott staying around and being able to cycle that weather, as you mentioned. Devon sort of started himself off in a position where it's really hard to win this weather war. You send the Torkoal in first and not after the Kyogre. This Venusaur is still super threatening, but it's coming in with Tailwind on the opposing side. It's coming in with a bunch of threat from both the Thunderous and that Kyogre. Neil already knows about the Focus Sash and can just do a safe Water Spout Airstream into that slot, and there's not really a whole lot you can do. It's definitely, the onus is on Devon to try to find a way to pivot that Torkoal out, bring it back in, stop the Kyogre from then setting up Rain again in the future. Definitely a bit of an awkward spot, even though Devon's sort of ahead in some ways with getting rid of that Zacian and getting this Venusaur close to position. Neil's just in such a good spot to start that Dynamax off and still has the Whimsicott in the back to reset Tailwind.
Yeah, Neil's Dynamax getting that Thunderous into that Dynamax form once again. It was pretty impressive like we saw in that last game, but it still ended up being pretty close. So you may want to get rid of this Venusaur before it can get a big Vine Lash off and continue to chip down and put you in that really kind of funky endgame position where the residual damage is more dangerous than the Pokemon themselves. However, Venusaur will be matching with a Gigantamax of its own. Once again, the threat of something like that G-Max Vine Lash is truly pretty overpowering, especially if you don't want to take that on your Pokemon like Kyogre, and you cannot get as much damage off with something like a Water Spout later because of losing so much HP. But Max Guard from the Venusaur, a very safe call. Stall out one of these turns, that Max Airstream will target right into it, and then this means this Kyogre, whose Water Spout will go off this turn, won't hit into that Venusaur. That Focus Sash still intact, but will hit the Tornadus here, and that does enough for a full one-hit knockout thanks to the rain and just how strong Kyogre can be. And this means now Devon only has one chance to bring the sun up, and he's really going to need it.
It is perfectly timed. The Tailwind ending on Neil's side right as the Torkoal comes back in to set up Sun. That's exactly what Devon needed to do to have a chance. But with that Whimsicott in the back, with the opportunity to cycle out that Kyogre, it's definitely a bit of an awkward situation. If this Thundurus has a Max Guard that I can go for, then you can sort of just switch the Whimsicott in for the Kyogre, and then switch the Kyogre back in, and suddenly this Venusaur is once again slower than the Thundurus. There are ways for Devon to be able to sort of try to pull this back, maybe get something out of this. He's definitely played to have this Torkoal Venusaur set up right now. Like, this is the turn that he's been really leading up to. No Tailwind, Sun set up, but it feels like Neil has just been one step ahead so often, and with that Pokemon lead, there's just so much you can do for the Weather Board.
Yeah, Kyogre pretty comfortably switching out here, not wanting to take a big Dynamax Vine Lash. G-Max Vine Lash, though, into the Whimsicott. This Whimsicott is really, it looks pretty bulky, right? Able to handle this so well. Does at least get those vines up for the Thundurus on the opposite side of the field, but this Max Airstream is going to hurt. Does also bring it down to that Focus Sash. No Defiant proc required. But, you know, at this point, I think the Whimsicott could even still go for something like a Moonblast or an Energy Ball and maybe just get that damage if it needs to. You can also set up another Tailwind, but Burning Jealousy is a really interesting move to have here from your Torkoal. You get a burn onto both of these Pokemon thanks to that boost that they got from the Max Airstream. And Burning Jealousy is a move that we've seen kind of sometimes hidden on Incineroar, but Torkoal is another great Pokemon to carry it.
Yeah, it's an awesome Burning Jealousy to get off. There's so many residual damage options at this point with the Vine Lash and the Burn, but I think that Thundurus getting off the Max Airstream, recognizing that it was perfectly safe to do so, the Venusaur can't put it to sleep when it's Dynamaxed, really does feel like it's starting to seal up this game, because Kyogre can come back in, this Thundurus will definitely stay faster than the Venusaur. Sure, it's burned, but that doesn't matter so much if the Venusaur is at 1 hit point, and the Torkoal is never going to win an endgame versus that Kyogre. So definitely Neil doing a great job of saying, you know what, I know I'm risking the Burning Jealousy burn here. That's okay. The pieces I need on the board are going to be just fine, even if they're burned.
Yeah, no switch in here. Whimsicott's Tailwind, though, will go up to try and match that really impressive speed from the Venusaur, who's Max Guard this turn. But Max Darkness will target down into that Torkoal. Great way to try and get some damage. Really does not do all that much, though. So at this point as well, you're getting a drop on the opposite side, dropping the special defense to help your Kyogre come in later and maybe get some big damage off. This Burning Jealousy will finish off the Whimsicott. And will allow for the Kyogre to come in, allow for that weather to change up. Kyogre's got the Tailwind now at its back, so it's going to be able to move faster, confirmed, and going to still be able to get off some big super effective damage. It's not burned at the moment, and it's not really going to have any opportunity to maybe get burned in the future.
That's a really neat little endgame trick that Neil is pulling out. So if Thundurus stops being an offensive threat, you can make it just sort of a supportive Pokemon. And they set up Tailwind, you get Thundurus to lower the special defense of everything, and now there's no way in the world that this Water Spout does not KO both Pokemon. This Torkoal is weak to it, rains up, it's at -1 special defense, and I really am liking that play from Neil. There were a few ways he could have locked up that endgame, but this is one of the strongest. Even if that Venusaur hadn't max guarded, Kyogre is just going to come in and start Water Spouting, and unless you can get like quintuple protects, you don't have a way out of that situation. And so just really well managed from Neil, keeping that Pokemon lead right when it was needed to win that Weather War, take advantage of the switch into Torkoal at the start of this game.
mean, never say never, right? Both of these Pokemon on Devon's side are going to protect. You got to play to that end game, especially when you're in something like the top 16. Thunderous revealing Crunch as that Dark type move that started that Max Darkness. Water Spout, not going to hit either of these Pokemon either. But like you said, I really like the opportunity to have Max Darkness when you're paired with something like a Kyogre or a big special attacker, because then you can help your partner get into a better position when it switches in, especially in these parts where you've only got 2 Pokemon left. And at that point too, if you wanted to be in a position where you weren't getting a boost at some point and were still getting a drop, and if for some reason you were against something like a Groudon and then you couldn't go for a Max Lightning, then it at least gives you another option just to kind of help secure an end game. Kyogre as well at this point, the fact that you can't burn it, I think is really kind of the biggest end game. Venusaur gets the double protect though, so that's one of them. Or 2 technically, right? Torkoal's protect does not get the double protect. So you had a weird chance for it. Wild Charge from the Thundurus into the Torkoal does very little damage. That burn is kind of helping you here. But the Water Spout from the Kyogre, not going to hit into the Venusaur, but will hit into the Torkoal, and this should be enough to get that knockout thanks to that special defense drop. Venusaur at 1 HP, I don't think there's anything that I can do for both of these Pokemon. It's not carrying something that can do, I think, enough damage to either one, but you still have a couple of turns left of Protect.
Yeah, this Venusaur can try to just make things last for a while, see what will happen, but I think Vine Lash is wearing out soon, and so there's not really a way to stop. Well, I guess if the Kyogre is slow, you may have caught me in like a foible here.
Yeah.
It's possible that there is a way out for Devon if you stall out the entirety of Tailwind, and the Venusaur is faster than the Kyogre. But I think Vine Lash might have just worn off, and so you have to do a couple more protects to get rid of the burn on Thundurus, and then the Kyogre really does just have this accurate move, and it's so hard to get that many protects.
Yeah, that is a pretty rough way, at that point. Like you said, there was 1 turn of Tailwind left as well, so you could have maybe gotten that triple protect. Then you get the Thundurus off of the field at least, thanks to the burn and the Vine Lash. However, though, that is going to be a win for Canada, and that puts Canada currently 3-1 over India. We do actually have another match on stream tomorrow, and that will be a match point between Ryan Lassetto and Varun Gudapati. So that is another opportunity for you guys to kind of see maybe if we'll get that confirmed tomorrow on stream live and see if Canada moves on, or if India is still in that fighting chance to move on to that top 4.
And thank you so much to both players for giving us just a wonderful match here. This has been one of my favorite team matchups to be able to showcase. This is the 3rd one that I've gotten to show of India versus Canada, and they're all so close. There's so much thought that goes into the difference between winning a game most of the time and winning a game all of the time, and it was so nice to see all of that really come into play in this particular match. And then also there were all the plays at the beginning to try to position so that you had a stronger win condition or not. So thank you to both players. A wonderful match, and best of luck for the last few that we'll see of this week.
Yeah, absolutely, right? Like you said, those beginning games, that Tailwind plus Restricted is a lead that we've seen in every single Restricted format over the years, whether that be 2016, 2019, this year as well. So it's something that I don't think you can ever not prep for. But the mind games that go along with it and forcing your opponent and yourself into a tough decision turn 1 can be pretty exhausting right out of the gate. So it is very telling of the players and their skills for getting to those end games and still playing to those outs and not being so mentally drained from trying to make those big decisions early on that you lose sight of what you're trying to do in the end. However, guys, between this round and next, we will be taking a short break, but then we have a double header between the United States and between France. So that is not 2 matches that you're going to want to miss. So please stay tuned.